Hey, everybody. So my name is Daryl Obert, and I'm going to be spending about a half hour talking to you guys about Maya 2016 and actually the extension release that's been announced at SIGGRAPH. So hopefully everybody is here to see Maya, because that's what we're going to be checking out. Is everybody here for Maya? Yep. Nice. All right, so quick question. How many people here are on Maya 2016, and how many people here are on previous versions? So less than half the room is on 2016. Well, 2016 obviously brought a lot of new functionality to the table, and we're going to talk about a couple of those things, but we're going to be primarily focusing on the new features that are in 2016 Extension 1. But one thing that I do want to mention briefly is 2016, the main thing for me about it that I like the most is performance. And I'm going to show you a quick example of the performance gains we got in 2016 with the new parallel rig evaluation that we have. And basically what the rig evaluation brings to the table is the ability for you to utilize all the resources that your computer has. All the CPU power that the computer has and the GPU power that the computer has can be applied to evaluating your graphs inside of Maya and accelerating them. This means that we're going to see significant speed improvements in many of your scenes. Almost all of your scenes are going to get faster because we can use all that power the computer has. And this is a pretty good example of what we would have seen in a previous version of Maya, like say Maya 2015. We have the evaluation mode set to DG, which is kind of the legacy mode of evaluating the dependency graph inside of Maya. And you can see that, two characters in our scene, pretty decent holly count, and we're moving around 11 frames per second, 10 frames per second. So I'm just going to jump over to the preferences and turn on the parallel rig evaluation mode, and we'll see the performance improvement that we get from that. So if we jump into the animation section underneath settings and just put on parallel, we're going to be using, again, the GPU and the CPU to evaluate this. So things like the skin clusters are going to get dumped onto the GPU using OpenCL. All the other things are going to be basically hitting all the different threads and cores that we have in the computer. And we're working on a pretty high-end HP Z840. It's got lots of cores. It's got a really nice Quadro K6000 card in there. So we're going to go from 10 frames per second, and I'm sure we're going to get a pretty significant speed improvement on this guy. So we're up to 45, so almost 4x performance improvement. That's drastic. That's really the main thing to me when someone says, what's 2016 all about? Performance. Everyone benefits from this, whether it's characters, spaceships, it doesn't matter. It's the dependency graph in Maya that's getting accelerated. So that's really exciting for us. So I'm going to go ahead and actually turn on the screen-based ambient occlusion. And you can see as soon as I turn that screen-based ambient occlusion on, our frame rate dropped down, but we're still well above 24 frames per second. So this is with all the bells and whistles turned on in Viewport 2.0. So we've got this really nice, rich visual experience that we're working with, hardware anti-aliasing turned on, screen-based ambient occlusion turned on, and because of that parallel rig evaluation, we're still above 24 frames per second, which is exactly what we want to work with inside of the application. So that's it for the stuff that we want to talk about, the legacy stuff in 2016. We're going to move forward now and start talking about the new features that the extension release bring to the table, and we're going to be looking at several of them. We're going to be looking at improvements that have been made to the look dev environment. We've got some new nodes inside of the hypershade window that we're going to play around with to do some cool shading effects. And then we're going to look at the new Scalable Vector Graphics importer, as well as the new text tool inside of Maya. And those are going to be the three things that we're going to concentrate on. So rendering, Scalable Vector Graphics, and text. So let's jump over to the rendering and begin talking about that really quickly. So actually, I'll let you see the whole animation play back from the point of view of our camera, just because I was pretty happy with my camera move. I kind of like this move. I like camera moves that are continuous, so I was pretty psyched with that one. So that was the tail end of the animation. This is where we're going to be dropping those vector graphics in, and then obviously this is again showing that kind of nice visual fidelity that we're getting in the viewport, the motion blur, the guy's kind of coming around, doing his little thing. And what we want to do is we want to add some more detail into the ground plane here. So it's a little, I kind of wanted it to be this kind of poppy black look, but I do want to get a little bit more wood grain in there. So we're going to go ahead, and that's going to be the first thing that we're going to concentrate in on, is adding in a little bit of extra texturing onto this ground plane. And we're going to be using some of those new look dev nodes in the hypershade window to do that. So the hypershade window was completely reworked in 2016. Again, for those of you who haven't used it, this is a really nice new feature. Obviously, the user interface has been overhauled. It's got graphics at scale based on the monitor that you're working on. And the look dev window makes it feel very current and modern. We can dock things inside of here. We can move things around. We now have material previews. We have the ability to add in a property editor. So if I highlight a shader in here and I click on the material preview, you're going to get the ability to have different shader balls, different environments that it's in. Lots of improvements made to that look dev environment, and we've continued that work in the extension release of 2016 with the addition of a few new nodes. So let's go ahead and just get our property editor in here also, because I definitely want to be able to work with that guy. So we'll just dock that over there. And I'm also going to pull out my Create tab, and we'll just sort of dock that guy over there. And I don't really need to see this whole list of stuff. I'm going to just jump over to a filtered view to show you the new nodes that we've added. So lots of new color nodes that have been added, both the color and float, the ability to multiply and unmultiply and pre-multiply textures. And we've also added in a new Simplex noise node that we'll be looking at a bit later. And what we want to do is we want to use some of these color nodes to help us add in some wood grain onto this floor. And this is something that's very fast and easy to do. So I've got, obviously, my first texture here, and then I've got this wood grain texture that we want to go ahead and start to mix into the overall look of this. And we're going to be using the color composite node to do that. So what color composite does is these are really basic building blocks. So if you pull color composite out, it's just sort of two colors, and we're going to screen them together, or we're going to mix them together using, again, this kind of very standard workflow. So if we grab color A, and then we'll just drop this guy into color B. We can take the out color of that, and we can shove that into color. And you'll notice how fast I'm able to make those connections in the node editor. We've been working on that, and it gets better every release. So in the extension release, things just kind of snap into it. It's really easy to hit those marks, and making those connections with these little noodles out of the in and outputs of these nodes is actually a lot easier than it used to be. So subtle little things like that have been improving inside of the node editor for every release. So obviously when we screen, put these two guys together with an add operator, it's a little washed out. I'm actually going to be using a screen to multiply these guys together, and we're going to just drop that factor down to sort of start blending those guys together. But I've lost that poppy look and feel that I had before. And if you look at that list, again, kind of standard, right? You're used to Photoshop. We have the things that you're going to expect to see here: multiply, screen, add, dodge, burn, all the stuff that you're used to doing in basic compositing nodes. It's kind of nice, right? Finally, Maya has something that feels standard and current in the node editor window. So what we want to do is we want to further refine this and get that poppy look back with the color correction node. So we'll go ahead and we'll just grab that guy out here. So we'll grab color correct. And if I middle mouse button drag it out, it's going to just kind of land right where I let go of my cursor there. So we're going to take the output of that and just shove that into the input of this guy. And this list is pretty standard again. So what we want to do is we want to pop the mids down a little bit. So we'll just drop the gamma down to kind of drop those mids down. We're going to take the output of this. Obviously, we'll grab that out color and shove that into the in color there so we can see that updating as we do this. So we've crushed this, right? Like we can't see any of that detail anymore. So I want to lift it back up. So we'll just do that by using a simple value. We'll overdrive that guy up to a value of like 1.5. And you can see we're starting to get something that looks pretty good here. But I still might want to go back in here and play around with this guy. Like let's just screen that in a little bit more, maybe go up to around range 5. So now we've got a little bit of wood grain in there. My logo looks a little saturated, so we can just jump back to that color correction node, just drop that saturation down, and then obviously we could change the U just using a simple 0 to 360 U shift. So we're trying to make things more pedestrian, more standard. That's basically the idea with a lot of these color nodes. So that looks pretty good, and we were able to take that and add in those two textures and get to a pretty good look and feel to what I wanted. So the next thing that we're going to look at, let's kind of move over here to these guys, is we want to go ahead and look at an area where there's a problem, and you might not immediately recognize it as a problem, but if I kind of draw your attention to it, you're going to see that I want to get this stripe to be red on this character. So that seems like something that's pretty simple to do. That stripe's being procedurally generated using just a ramp texture, right? So you'd think, all right, well, I've got this ramp texture right here, and I've got this number 32. I want to match the red in that number 32, so let me just sample that color. So what we're going to do is we're going to solo that file texture, number 32, pretty straightforward. The soloing function isolates the view. It switched that from the shader ball to the 2D view in my material viewer, and then it goes ahead and it removes all the color information in the viewport. So when you solo something, it's just basically the pure color if it's a texture map. If it was a bump map, it would be a diffuse kind of white color with just a lighting contribution to it. But we're going to use this soloed version of that 32 to go ahead and sample that red. So you think, okay, this is pretty straightforward. We'll sample that red. That's going to give me the red that I want. So now, when I do my layered texture here, I'm going to have my 32 layered on top of my, my little red stripe, and that's going to be layered on top of our ground plane, or our underlying diffuse channel there. So if we solo this stripe here, you can see that, okay, yep, that stripe's definitely the same red. So what happens when we solo that layered texture? Well, you can see that when we do that, there's actually a problem there. You can see that this 32, on that monitor, you can still see it. It's a lot punchier, right? But the red on the stripe there is kind of darker. It's not the same color, but when we soloed those textures individually, they were the same color. So what's going on here? Well, if you look in the 2D view here, hopefully you can see it on that screen. Maybe you can. It's kind of bright in here. this is actually kind of bleeding through a little bit, and that's because this ramp, if we go back and solo that guy, and if we just hit our 2 key and double-click on the alpha channel, don't know if you guys know that, but if you're soloing something and you double-click on a channel, an output channel, it'll show you that in the soloed view. So we're looking at the soloed view of that alpha channel. It's based on luminosity, right? So the reason that red doesn't match is because it's bleeding through to the underlying texture. And that's not cool. That's not what we want to have happen. So to get around that, we're going to use a couple of these utility nodes that were newly introduced in the extension release to go ahead and fix that problem. So let's just go ahead and what we want to do is we want to generate an alpha channel. Everywhere that there's not black, I want it to be white. So we've got some really nice options to do that. We've got a color logic node that we can drag out to do that. This is going to run an operator, so it's pretty straightforward. It allows you to compare A to B with the logic, right? So we're going to basically say, if it's not equal to black, give me the Boolean switch. The logic operator just sends out true or false, 0 or 1. So anywhere that isn't going to be black is going to send out a 0, and anywhere that is going to be black is going to send out a 1. So we've got this logic operator, and now we want to do something useful with that. So great, let's go ahead and grab another one of these new nodes. We're going to grab the math or the color condition. So we'll grab color condition. We'll grab that guy out there. So color condition is going to allow me to take that output of this color logic and do something useful with it. We're going to basically make an alpha channel. So we'll say one's going to be white, one's going to be black, pretty straightforward. So we'll grab the output of that, drive it into the condition. So now if we solo this guy, look at those stripes, right? So that's our old alpha channel. This is the new alpha channel that we're making with the logic node and the color condition node. So just like that, we've fixed that problem using a couple of these new utility nodes. So all we have to do is jump back into our layered texture, obviously, and just drag and drop that guy into the alpha channel for that middle, which is the ramp there. And as soon as we do that, you can see that it obviously looks exactly the way you'd expect it to. So using a few of these nodes, we were able to fix a problem really quickly and elegantly. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is the new noise node. And this new noise node is actually, it's pretty killer. We'll kind of move over here and look at this guy. So what I want to do is I want to start to add in a little subtle detail onto this character's kind of rubbery sections. Like these areas are all kind of supposed to be like a stretchy kind of rubbery type stuff. So we're going to jump over to that leg. And you can see that I'm using these multiple tabs inside of the Hypershade window. I hope you get a sense of how fast and easy it is to work in the Hypershade window in 2016. It really is one of the areas that I think has shown the most improvement as far as a usability standpoint in Maya in the last few years. This Hypershade window, Nicola, who's been working on it, has done a really great job with it. So we're going to be doing this new noise operator. So let's just jump over to our 2D textures, and we'll drag this guy out here. So this Simplex noise is actually really, really cool. The thing that's nice about it is it tiles, it doesn't have tiling artifacts. So you can get very fine detail that samples extremely well, that's extremely fast without any tiling details. That's really the thing that makes it so special, is the fact that it can work without having any tiling details. So we'll go ahead and we'll check out what a tiling detail is. We'll grab an old legacy fractal just to show you the kind of compare and contrast between the two. Kind of grab that guy and pull him out. So let's go ahead and just shove onto this, this guy's color, this old fractal here. So let's just say we're going to take the out color of that guy and go to the in color of that dude. So we've got a fractal on there now. And if we take this and we do something like repeat it 30 times, and we kind of zoom around to the back side of our character's leg here, you can kind of, hopefully it's picking up on that monitor. You guys see that tiling? See the pattern? Very clear, distinct pattern when we tile that thing 30 times. That's not good, right? That's not going to help. If I'm trying to do a large terrain and I want to shove a fractal across that to break up a texture map, you start to see that tiling pattern of that fractal. It doesn't have any benefit. It doesn't help you in any way, right? So that's what the Simplex noise allows us to do, is break things up without having that tiling pattern. So we'll grab this guy. We'll do the same thing. So we'll grab out color. We'll go to in color there. So now we have this new fractal on there. Pretty straightforward. We'll go back to this placement node, and we'll go ahead and we'll tile that guy out 30 times and 30 times. Oops. And you can see, obviously, that there's no tiling artifacts there. So that's really, really cool. The other thing that's kind of nice about the Simplex noise is it's not just a fractal, right? So you can switch this to be different types of noise. It can generate fractals. It can generate cellular patterns. So let's just drop that scale down a little bit on this guy so you can see that a little more clearly. So the thing that's kind of nice about this is the cellular pattern can do things like bumps, lizard skins, all kinds of different skin effects and things like that you can get with this cellular pattern. Honeycomb patterns you can make with the cellular pattern by just modifying the attributes on it. And then we also have the ability to do ridges. And ridges are really good for cracks or veins or lightning effects or something like that. The ridge noise generator will allow you to generate really cool things like that. Now the thing that's kind of fun about this is if we jump back to that cellular pattern, is you'll also notice that there's a distortion. So we can distort in both U and V. So we can start to layer a few of these simplex noises on top of each other to begin building procedural networks, again, that don't have any tiling artifacts that are also subtly distorting each other. So let's look at an example of that really quickly. So we'll jump back into the 2D node. We'll grab this guy right here. And we'll just take the output of this. And we're going to shove the output of this into the distort U and the distort V, and then we'll just start turning up this distortion factor. And as soon as I start doing that, you can see that pattern kind of changing, and then obviously we can go downstream and start making changes to that overall fractal that then is going to ultimately drive that distortion pattern. So very fast, very easy to work with, and ultimately gives you the kind of effects that you want to get to. So let's go ahead and talk about the sampling of this one more time. I kind of mentioned the fact that it can sample really, really cleanly. So we're going to go back to our original color channel. And with that done, then we'll just drag and drop this guy onto something like a bump. So we'll hop into that guy, and we'll drop that bump value down. It's going to be kind of crazy, right? Like let's put that down to a value of 0.05 or something really subtle. Kind of move around here to the front side of that guy. And we'll just grab this noise, and we'll just crank that up. So even in viewport 2.0, you can see that we've got this really fine detail in there, and the sampling's really, really crystal clear. We're not getting tiling artifacts, even though that's probably tiled 100 times. There's no tiling artifacts there. And if you jump into something like Mental Ray, we jump into Mental Ray and just give this a quick render here. Let's unsolo everything. Let's just grab that guy. And you can see how fast that starts to render off with Mental Ray. And as this continues to refine, you're going to get this really nice little subtle breakup on there. So if you're trying to do like plastics or something like that that have a little tiny fine grain, that simplex noise is going to get you there very, very quickly and efficiently. So that's it for the color information and the Hypershade workflow. Hopefully you guys enjoy that stuff and it makes sense to you. The next thing that we're going to talk about is going to be the new Scalable Vector Graphics workflow that we have inside of 2016 Extension 1. So let's go ahead and turn off that, jump back to our hardware shading, and we'll jump and look through our shot camera here. So we've got this kind of in shot, and what we want to do is we want to have some graphics kind of load in here. And we're going to be using the new Scalable Vector Graphics importer to do that. So this allows us to bring in information. Scalable Vector Graphics, either you get off the website or maybe something coming out of Illustrator. So let's go ahead and get that SVG node in our scene. So once we've got that in our scene here, we can just kind of jump out to our perspective to begin working with that guy. So we've got that guy kind of hanging out in our scene. And once you have the SVG node in there, this is just a placeholder. It's a dummy object. So we can add the SVG data onto this in two different ways. We can use kind of the standard file importer to just go say, let's go browse off to our disk, and then we could grab an SVG file that way. Or if we want to, we can work with a copy-paste workflow. And this gives me a non-destructive way of working with something like Illustrator. So I can continue to refine my work in Illustrator and push those results back into Maya. So it allows you, again, to have a very fast, kind of fireless workflow. So let's go ahead and check that out in action. We'll jump over to Illustrator. And I'm going to just grab all the objects of this kind of graphic design that I did really quickly inside of Illustrator. We'll copy that using Control-C to add that into our buffer. We'll jump back over to Maya, and we'll just say paste. So as soon as we do that, you can see that Maya's now gone ahead and it's pasted that information in. Pretty straightforward, right? So the thing that's kind of cool about this is because it's a polygon geometry that's being generated from this Scalable Vector Graphics file, we have the ability to adjust its resolution. So if we jump up here to our mesh settings, I can obviously start to adjust how dense that geometry is that's being generated from that. We can kind of leave the defaults here. And the other thing that's kind of nice about this is we have individual controls for the extrusion as well as the bevels, and they're completely customizable, right? So pretty straightforward there. So if we were to maybe start playing around with some of these attributes on this extrusion, I can kind of zoom in here, and we'll put our extrude distance down a little bit. It's a little fat there. Maybe we'll crank this up to a slightly higher value. We'll give it some more edges to work with. And I can just kind of start jumping through some of these presets here. So the thing that's kind of nice about this is you can also put negative values into these, and you're going to get the inverse effect of that. So it's completely configurable by the user to get a variety of different effects and looks with this. Pretty straightforward. The other thing that's kind of nice about this is the bevels. So we have the ability to do both inside bevels and outside bevels. You can also turn off the generation of the caps if you wanted to, or you could have it just generate curves. So there's lots of power and flexibility inside of this tool. Now for this example, I don't really need any crazy bevel on my extrusion or any crazy profiling on the extrusion, but I do want to play around with the bevel. So we're going to kind of scroll in here, and if you look at the design of this, if I did an outside bevel, it's going to bevel from the point of view of that face and go out from there, and that's not really what we want to have in this example. So we're going to go ahead and do an inner bevel. So we'll just kind of do something like that. We'll go over to our front bevel. We'll turn that guy on. Notice that the front bevel is independent from the back bevel, so again, you have a lot of control there. And we'll just sort of dial this guy in. So we'll just use this kind of little round. It's going to give it kind of a little radius on that guy. And we'll put this up to like a value of 1.5. We'll drop this down to something like 0.1. So we've got this nice little softening happening there. So you can see that we're getting that little specular pop on top of that guy. So that's all pretty straightforward. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to begin to give this a little more style. I'm going to basically bend it. So to make it bend, I want to retessellate this a bit more. And having the ability to deform objects was something that we kind of addressed right off the bat when we were working on this tool. We knew we wanted to be able to make things that were able to squash and stretch and have character. So the deformable mesh options are really pretty straightforward. If we turn this on, it's going to go through and it's going to tessellate that. And I have a lot of control on where we're going to put those polygons. So if I wanted more edges coming down the sides of these letters, I could just make that max edge length a little bit lower. Notice that it doesn't add any really new faces, new polygons in the faces there. So if I wanted more polygons in the face, I just drop that value down on the refine threshold, and it's going to retessellate that. So you put the polygons where you want them. We now have something that's going to deform and squash and stretch nicely inside of Maya. Now I'm going to just kind of crank this stuff back up. We don't need to have that many polygons for what I'm trying to do here. We'll just go ahead and jump this back to something like a value of, I don't know, 4. And with that done, we'll jump over to our deforming menu. And we'll just add on top of this guy a nonlinear deformer. So I love the nonlinear deformers. If you're doing any type of broadcast work, these nonlinears are great. You know, let's go ahead and just give this a little bit of curve on that guy. We can go ahead and just spin this around. Hold down my J key, which is a pretty common key to use in Maya. The J and the G key, you use them all the time. So let's just go ahead and spin that. Ooh, what's going on there? Uh-oh. My marker menu is kind of flaking out on me. Let's try that again. Come on. No. Something's weird here. Let's just reset that tool. Reset you. I held down my J key, and it started to snap. Like the marker menu got stuck on me there, which is kind of weird. Shouldn't have done that. Should have just snapped to a 45. But I can just spin it around like this and kind of get it where I want it. So with that done, we could increase that curvature a little bit more. And you can do really fun, cool stuff with this, right? Now, I really wanted this just to have a little bit of bend, sort of going the other direction, so that when my camera kind of comes in here, it just sort of comes in and kind of drops and looks pretty good. So now the next thing that we want to do is we want to go ahead and add in some text into this, and we're going to be using the text tool to do that. So the text tool, again, works very similar to the Scalable vector graphics tool. It's the same thing. It's just instead of getting the data that feeds the tool, instead of being an SVG file, it's just going to be a font. But essentially, all the tessellation attributes, all those things are going to work exactly the same. So let's go ahead and just check this guy out really quickly. So we'll go and we'll scale this down, and we'll kind of rise it up here. And it works really well with multiple lines of type. It has all the things that you would expect a type tool to have. You know, if we jump in here and we start looking at this, you can right justify, left justify. If you had another word in here, something like, you know, I don't know, 3D type Maya, you can go ahead and adjust the leading and the kerning and the tracking and all the stuff that you would expect. We also have a manipulator tool that allows you to go and do sub-leading, sub-kerning on each individual character or on each individual line. By just holding down Control-Shift, you can switch over to a line or word mode, or you can go over to a full line mode. So pretty straightforward there. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and just copy and paste some text into this guy. So we'll grab these two teams that we want to begin working with here, and we'll just put those guys over there, and we'll get out of that text manipulation tool and just translate this kind of over here, and we're going to scale that guy down. So what we want to do is we want to add this into that same deformer so that it's getting that same bend. Oops, let's get out of that guy. We want to get this guy in that same kind of that same warped state. So that's really easy to do inside of Maya. All we have to do is grab that deformer, and we'll just go up to our Edit Membership tool. We're going to add into this
those points so that they kind of go along for the right of that arc. So now that we've done that, we want to begin animating these letters kind of coming in here. So I'm going to be using the animation section on the actual tool. And the reason I'm going to be doing this is because by animating the words or the characters or the lines using the animation tab is I can get a delay for each word, line, or character. So let's go ahead and just turn on animate. Pretty straightforward there. So obviously, if we start to spin this around the y-axis, you can see that it's going to spin each word or each character. If we go over to a word mode, it'll spin each word. We have full control over where the pivot points are. You can animate the pivot points. So obviously, if we push that, it's going to spin around the left side. If we push it to a value of 1, it's going to spin around the right side. You can use ranges beyond 1 and 0. You can obviously go as far as you want. But it gives you a lot of control because you can also be setting keyframes on the pivot points as these objects are flying in. So all pretty straightforward work there. So we'll just kind of zero that guy out. We'll go ahead and we're going to say, you know what, let's just kind of look through our shot camera here. And let's just spin this guy around. Oops, let's just go over here. And we'll just animate these guys really quickly kind of coming in. So we're going to say, let's go back here to maybe frame 380. And at frame 380, we're going to push these guys off an axis back. So they're going to kind of bleed in here. So we'll say something like minus 200. Actually, we'll go 200 on that, not minus 200. And we'll spin it maybe something like 300. So we'll just set a key on that guy. Let's make sure we're doing that at the character level. And then we'll go to frame, just forward a few frames. Doesn't really matter where it is. Put this as something like 180, or actually 0. Kind of zero everything out on that guy, and we'll set a keyframe there. So now as I start to scrub through that, because we've got that kind of delay on there of 50 frames for each character, they're just going to kind of wipe in here in a really nice way, right? Now, obviously, you can adjust that delay. You could reverse the delay. You could randomize it. There's lots of control over that, kind of how that delay is going to get calculated. Now, all this is also happening with function curves, right? So if I didn't want it to just kind of ease in or ease out, I could take this object and go ahead and just jump over to our graph view with it selected, kind of frame all that stuff up and just make change the function curves on this guy. So we'll make them just be straight linear. And the last thing that I want to do with this is I want to go ahead and layer on top of this another Maya deformer. So we're going to go ahead to the animation. We'll turn that guy off and turn that guy off. And I'm going to add onto this just like an old deformer. I actually really I kind of like the jiggle deformer. It sort of gives it a dynamic effect, but it's actually just using expressions to do it. So it's a math-based kind of jiggle. So it means that you can scrub it, and it doesn't really have to we'll start at frame 300 here. You don't have to start at frame 1 for it to kind of work here. So we'll just drop that jiggle weight down to something like 0.9. I'm going to drop the dampening down really low, and we'll drop the stiffness down really low, too. And we'll just kind of play this back and see the effect that we get as this type kind of bleeds in here and kind of comes on. So you can see here comes that jiggle deformer, kind of working through that stuff. Maybe we'll increase the stiffness on that guy. So the last thing that I want to show you is how we can take the text tool and do some other things with it that are kind of cool. The text tool is very open in its ability to have data driving it. So let's look at an example of that really super quickly. So we're going to grab this stuff, and we can get rid of it. We don't really need to see that. We'll jump back into that text tool really quickly. And with that text tool sort of there, we'll jump back over here. We'll just kind of refresh that guy. I don't know, type another word inside of there. Here, we'll actually not do multiple lines. We'll just do this. And what we want to do is we want to have this be animated. So we're going to turn animation on, but we're not going to set keyframes on it. We're going to drive this with an external source. So we're going to drop that kerning down so that those guys are basically at the origin. And I'm going to drive this using a particle system inside of Maya. So we'll just grab our particle tool. This is in the sketch mode, so I'm just going to drop particles, S-U-P-E-R. U-S-E-R. So I just drop those guys kind of down, hit the return key, and just like that, we've got our particles in our scene. I'm going to add onto those particles a vortex field, and I'm also going to add onto those particles a Newton field, and we'll just get back to frame 1 here, and we'll grab our object and our particles. We'll graph both of those guys in the node editor, and what we want to do is we want to take the shell deformer, which is really where it drives that text. That's where we're doing all the animation on. We want to have that shell deformer get positioned by the particles of this particle shape. So this is really easy to do inside of Maya. We're just going to expand this list to show all those connections. And if you look down here, you can see that there is, oops, did I not grab? I got the wrong one. That's not the shell deformer. No, maybe that is a shell deformer. Weird. Let's regraph that guy. I must have got the wrong thing. Let's make sure animate's turned on. Yeah, it is. Cool. OK. Grab that and our particles. And jump back into that guy. And let's graph that one more time. There it is. Shell deformer. I did grab the wrong thing. All right. So we're going to go ahead and show all the attributes on that guy. And we're going to take the important one, which is this translate in PP, and have that be driven by our particles. So this is really pretty straightforward, and I'll kind of scooch this over so that you can sort of see this happen as soon as we do that. So we're going to say out of this guy, we're going to take the position, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, position, and we're going to shove that into our position PP. So we'll go position. The monitor's a little smaller than the one I'm used to working on. So you can see as soon as we do that, those guys have sort of updated. If we hit playback on this, off they go. They start getting positioned by that guy. And we're also going to grab the out rotation. So I've got self-collision turned on these particles. I've got a ground plane turned on these particles. So by just doing that, when we sort of play around with this, they're going to look kind of fun. It's going to have this kind of cool effect. So we'll just go over here and actually grab that outliner, grab this Newton field, and hit interactive playback on that guy. So with the interactive playback going, I can start to move these guys around. And the thing that's really cool about this is it's completely non-destructive, right? So since this is being driven by that text tool, I can go back into the attributes for that guy and change it to just say, you know, I just put my name in there, just cuz. And you know, if we hit playback, it all just works, right? So that's really the power of the Scalable vector graphics workflow, the new lookdev nodes that were added inside of Maya, as well as the new text tool inside of Maya. So thanks for taking the half hour for joining us. I'm going to be hanging out at the HP Experience. It's sort of at the main entrance to the lobby. I'm on that HP box several hours during the day. So if anybody wants to come by and talk about Maya, please come by and spend some time with me. Also, check out my blog. It's on the area. And it's called The Desk. And then I also have a mirror of that kind of happens on YouTube called Maya Monday. So thanks again, everybody, for taking the time to come check out Maya 2016 Extension 1.